It is very, very complicated. So we tried to think of a way to equate it, to make it almost normalised. So we came up with the idea that the taxpayer paid the equivalent of a loaf of bread or a pint of milk each year, and actually people can relate to that. And actually people think, gosh, that's incredible, and people are always surprised about it. As a communications person, you're always behind the scenes, you're never in front of the camera. So I was honoured to walk across that iconic forecourt at Buckingham Palace and post the announcement about Prince George's birth on the railings.
Oh, wow. So what was that like? Were you nervous before?
I was very nervous.
So many people there.
They're very nervous.
Don't drop it.
I know, absolutely don't drop it. But then it's funny, you get home, and my son had been at a tea party, and he said, Mummy, we saw you on the telly. Wasn't very interesting.
Everyone, and welcome to a new episode of a Right Royal podcast with me, Emmy.
And me, Emily.
Wait, where's Andrea?
We sent her into exile after Spain won the Euros.
Oh, yeah, we needed a break after that.
Only kidding. She is on holiday in Spain, enjoying her team's win, so we are holding the fort, because Royal News doesn't get to lie on a beach in Spain.
At least not this week. It's been really busy.
It has been a little bit busy. We've had a big update on royal spending. We've had royal appearances at the Olympics. A big update from the Invictus Games, all about its return to the UK.
And who can forget the royals celebrated a very special birthday this week?
I know, Prince George is 11 and he's all grown up.
He's so big.
We are going to be talking about all that and more with former Communications and Press Secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Ailsa Anderson, in just a moment.
But first, I want to talk to you about money.
What are you offering me?
You should go ask the royal family for some, if you want some, because they seem to be doing all right.
They're doing pretty well, aren't they, financially?
Well, you would know. You went to a briefing with them.
I went to several briefings.
There we go. So let's get into it, shall we?
I think we should.
Right, Emily. So I want to kick things off by talking about money.
Good.
And it sounds like the royals are minted.
Yes. Well, that's not a massive surprise, is it? I mean,
no. But, it could be one of these things where you think that they're, the wealthiest family in the world, but actually when you look into it, it's like, you scratch the surface and there's not a lot going on there. But you've just been to several briefings about the royal expenses. To fill me in, because I don't know anything. So what were they all about?
Look, so it's quite complicated, but the headline figures are many millions of pounds. And I think the key one that stood out this week is that the sovereign grant, which is what funds the king and his family and their official work, is going to increase next year. Now, there's a very complicated formula around this, but what you need to know is for the last 3 years, it's been something like £86.3 million. That's a huge amount of money.
Is this taxpayers' money?
This is taxpayers' money. But a big proportion of that has been going into the 10-year resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. So that has been sort of planned for over many, many years. And that building work is coming to an end in 2027. More interestingly, though, is that this complex formula is basically the sovereign grant is a percentage of the Crown estate. And this is land and properties and holdings that monarchs over the centuries have accumulated. And in return for getting money from the taxpayer, the king and the late queen basically surrendered all the income from this Crown estate to the public. So in return, they get a percentage of it. And they've changed the percentage over the last year and it's lowered. So technically, you'd expect them to be getting less. The key thing that we've found out this week is that the sovereign grant next year is going to soar up to 132 million. And that's despite them lowering the percentage that the royal family are entitled to. And the reason for this is that the Crown estate has been granting licences for wind farming, offshore wind farming. Obviously, renewable energy is huge at the moment. The government is all for it. And it means that they've recorded a profit of £1.1 billion.
Wow.
And that is then going back into the public purse. So there's a kind of reciprocal arrangement going on here. And what's interesting is that the king has specifically asked for this percentage to be lowered. And he wants the surplus profits to go back for the public good. So while they will be seeing an uptick in their funding to 132 million, the uptick will cover the ongoing costs of renovating Buckingham Palace. But another 140 or so million will go back into public coffers. So everyone is ultimately going to benefit from this change. But there have been a few headlines around this week. And I know one that grabbed you was Prince William's finances.
Yeah, what's going on with that? So from what I gather, he's being sneaky about it. Is sneaky the wrong word?
Sneaky is the wrong word. So what's interesting, this has been the first...
This is the problem with just reading headlines.
Exactly.
And not getting any context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the first full year of accounts that we've had since he became Prince of Wales. If you remember last year, he'd only been in the role for 6 months. So they didn't give us, a full financial report. And what's interesting is that this year they have told us what his income has been from the Duchy of Cornwall. Just a quick explainer for anyone listening.
Yes, please. What is the Duchy of Cornwall? I hear this thrown around all the time.
So do you want a quick explanation or a slightly longer one?
I want, it can be whatever length, but like I'm 5, please.
Okay, very quick history lesson.
Okay.
Edward III set up the Duchy of Cornwall in 1337 for his son, who was very imaginatively also called Edward. And the idea was that this area of land and the properties on it would generate income for him as heir to the throne.
Right.
So the monarch has their own income from something called the Duchy of Lancaster, which again is like landed estate. And the idea is that every Prince of Wales or heir to the throne benefits from the income from this. So this year, Prince William has had an income of around 23 million from the Duchy of Cornwall. It's basically a huge property portfolio.
So people paying, rent or?
Rent, investments, and obviously assets on the land. So he has done very well. It's actually slightly down on the income his father was receiving in the same role before he became king.
Why is that, I wonder?
Well, I think, with any property portfolio, things fluctuate, don't they? Interestingly, though, and what people have picked up on is a difference in the way he's reporting it. So when Charles was Prince of Wales, he was quite transparent about his income and expenditure. So he would break it down into like staffing costs, even down into the numbers of different types of staff, like people in housekeeping, gardeners, valets, that kind of thing. So we had quite a good overview of who was in the household.
Okay.
Prince William is taking a different approach. And there are a few possible reasons for that. But the bottom line is he hasn't told us how much tax he's paid. And that means that people are now suspicious.
Right.
Now, there's no reason to say that he's paying any less tax than our king was when he was Prince of Wales. But the fact that they haven't told us has made people question it.
Yeah.
But, this is a voluntary arrangement from the heir to the throne. It started under Prince Charles. He pays tax on whatever's left after his official costs, so covering the costs of his engagements and, the duties that he and Kate perform. So it's a really tricky one, and it may be that they're finding their feet and that they're not comfortable with sharing too much at the moment. I think something really interesting to point out as well is that they are going through a really unusual time at the minute. It may be that they have employed people to help with the princess in her recovery. Perhaps that's the reason they don't want to put more information out there at the moment. But I do think that they may certainly review that decision next year.
Because I guess with transparency comes media attention. And, let's face it, if it came out that there was extra costs for Kate and her current recovery, that would be on every headline in the country, wouldn't it?
Yeah, who knows what's going on behind the scenes.
Speculative, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that, certainly William and Charles just have done things in a different way. We heard from the Keeper of the Records at the Duchy of Cornwall this week that, under Prince Charles, he would get long telephone calls up, asking to be updated on things that were going on, and Prince William prefers WhatsApp. So he's on WhatsApp.
Voice notes like the rest of us.
And he's apparently very, very hands-on, and he wants to be kept updated about things all the time. So the tax headline is a really interesting one, but it also slightly washes away all the other stuff that was discussed. And there's some really good things going on there. Obviously, he's expanding his building of affordable homes on land in Cornwall and also in Kent. And there's a huge drive to boost sustainability. So there are some good things going on. We can talk a bit more about that if you like.
I do have a couple of things. I mean, one, I've just got to say this as a statement. It's not really a question, but it blows my tiny mind that they get taxpayers' money and then they also pay taxes. It's like, how does that work? But also, William, it's just, the problem with it is that it looks like it gives the impression that he's got something to hide. Yeah. That's the biggest issue, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's like
probably doesn't.
No,
Keep it
exactly.
private.
Exactly. And I think that, certainly it's something they probably will review ahead of next year's.
They didn't go down well, did it?
Well, there have been a lot of conversations about it on social media, and it's really not the kind of headline they want because, as I say, there are lots of really positive things going on as well. And the fact that they are contributing to the public purse, is a good thing, and I think something they should be shouting from the rooftops.
Speaking of the public purse, I am curious. How much are we individually shelling out for the royals? How much tax?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I knew you were going to ask me
How much
this.
have I made for the Walesers this year?
Well, not just for the Wales, but for the whole operation.
The whole operation.
So for the sovereign grant, it equates to around £1.29 per person in the UK. A year.
A year?
Yeah, so it's like a third of a cup of coffee.
I chuck them a couple quid.
I know. Look, it's also a controversial figure to sum it up like this, because for starters, that is including the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. So if you take that amount of money off, it actually comes down to something like 77 pence. But this figure doesn't take into account security. And that is something that's always kept private. That's managed by
hidden costs.
That is managed by the Metropolitan Police in London.
I see.
So things like the police protection officers, crowd control, things like that are in addition to the sovereign grant, and we are never given figures for those because, understandably, security is kept private for operational reasons. So they don't want to tell us how many police are on this and who's looking after who, and that I think is fair.
Again, it takes away the transparency a little bit, though, doesn't it?
It has been the case though for many, many years, and I don't think there's any appetite to change that at the moment. Obviously, the counter argument from royalists is always like, look what they do for the economy.
Sure.
Look how many people come to the UK because they're intrigued by the royal family.
And what they do for charities as well. They put so much attention on charities. That's my big argument, I think, because obviously I'm all for the monarchy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like they really do a lot of good with charities that otherwise wouldn't get that sort of, national, international attention.
Yeah. It's a really tricky one. I think it's always worth having the debate, and certainly people from like the Republic movement are arguing that actually, the Crown Estate and these duchies are really public property and that they no longer should be presided over by, a couple of people who've inherited them. But that, that's an argument for another day.
that's an argument for off camera.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something we should, get into with Ailsa shortly. But I wanted to touch on the environmental aspects. We did get some really interesting little nuggets about that. And obviously we know that King Charles is all about sustainability. He's installing solar panels at Windsor Castle for the first time. He is adapting the state Bentleys to run on biofuel.
Wow.
And they're looking at making this an electric fleet in future. They already use electric cars for a lot of their travel.
I want to play devil's advocate again.
Do it.
I don't know why I've taken this role today, but didn't the Walesers just buy 2 new helicopters?
Not the Waleses, so it's the Buckingham Palace.
I don't know why I keep pinning everything on the Walesers today. I apologise.
They do, the Walesers do use the helicopters, but we were told that they are buying 2 Augusta Westland helicopters to replace the existing Sikorskis, which are now 15 years old. And actually, I was told the other day, 2 years past their normal sell-by date.
Ooh.
You're a nervous flyer, I'm a nervous flyer.
Yeah, I wouldn't be thrilled.
I'd prefer to be in the new helicopter, wouldn't you?
I'd prefer to just be on the ground. That's fine, I'll get a taxi. Yeah.
Look, and it is something that obviously comes up at these briefings. Journalists say, well, look, how can you be talking about sustainability on the one hand, and on the other, taking helicopters and charter flights up and down the country?
It's such a valid...
It is a really valid one. I mean, I've written about it in my newsletter this week because...
Oh, hashtag ad.
Hashtag. It is an interesting one. There's effectively like a committee of people at the palace who consider each journey individually and weigh up, the costs to the public purse, security, whether or not it's going to disrupt the wider public, whether it means they can carry out more engagements, and of course, the environmental cost. So everything is very carefully thought through. And sometimes, taking a charter flight is unavoidable. I know William had to take one out to Kuwait for a very significant funeral. And sometimes, obviously, they're asked to travel on behalf of the Foreign Office. So some of these things are unavoidable.
Yeah.
But they are trying to use more sustainable air fuel. So in these new helicopters, I think they can take what the current industry maximum is 50% sustainable aviation fuel. And they've put in a new tank containing that at RAF Odeon, which is where the King's helicopters are based. And so there is a real push longer term to make things as green as possible. But like the finances, it's healthy to have these debates.
Absolutely, yeah. If we're going to continue debating then, Emily, I have another question. I heard that the Wales have hired considerably more staff this year as well. So what's all that about?
Well, they've gone from 50 to 66, which if you
16 more people.
But if you consider the change in their roles, that's not a huge leap. And I think it is worth pointing out that the former Prince of Wales, his numbers were close to 120.
Wow.
So it's actually fairly modest
Almost.
compared to, previous households. And I think that was another thing that piqued people's interest, that they haven't gone into details about who those people are. I mean, it doesn't, take a rocket scientist to work out. They've got new responsibilities. He's got a whole new duchy to manage. They've taken on new military roles and other patches.
But you don't know what the hirings are for?
We don't know the exact breakdown.
Okay.
So, and that may again be reported next year. So I think it's slightly disingenuous to be shocked about that, because I think you'd expect now with the new seniority they have, they're going to need a bigger boat.
Another thing I wanted to circle back to was, talking about their transport and how they get around. I sort of understand sometimes they need to charter planes. They need their own helicopters, sure. What is the royal train, and why does that still exist? And how much is that costing everybody?
This is a really good question. So, and just to go back on a point as well about the things that they're considering now, especially when it comes to the King's travel arrangements. He is still recovering from cancer.
Yeah.
So one of their extra factors this year has been minimising travel time for him. So it may be that some journeys he could have done by the means have been taken by helicopter this year because, understandably, he doesn't want to be sitting around in traffic or on the First Great Western like the rest of us.
Yeah, sure.
If he's not feeling on tip-top form. The Royal Train has been around for decades. It's effectively, a few carriages that are decked out for the monarch. And there's a bedroom, there's a dining room, there's a study. It's basically like a travelling hotel. But it does raise eyebrows because it is very expensive to run. I think looking at the stats this week, there was a £52,000 bill for a couple of days the King spent in Yorkshire.
£52,000?
It is an extraordinary figure. But their argument is that sometimes it's kind of relevant. This one was visiting a railway. There were several rail-related engagements, so it was a fitting way to arrive. But it also provides security and overnight accommodation, which, if you think about it, for a monarch, their security detail, their aides can amount to a fair amount. But it is something that is under review. And it's something that they've been reviewing for some time, but because it hasn't really been a normal year because of the King's illness, and because of the change of reign, I think they want to just give it a little bit longer before they decide to shelve it. Because if you remember, going back a few decades, there was the Royal Yacht Britannia, and that was decommissioned because it was, again, a very expensive way of ferrying them around, quite literally.
Yeah, so the Queen loved it, didn't she?
The Queen loved it, and I think certainly for the royals, the Royal Train does hold some special memories. And, it's by all accounts a bit no frills. I mean, if you ever look, and there are pictures I know on our website of the interiors, it's quite dated. But I guess it's quite nice to be able to have that option, and you're sort of in a self-contained bubble for a while, which is a difficult thing. You can't just rock up and stay in a Premier Inn if you're the King. I mean,
I guess not.
It'd be great headlines if he did.
Well, it's a very comfy bed.
According to Sir Lenny Henry.
Yeah, he'd have a very restful stay, according to Lenny.
I think we should talk a little bit more about this with someone who knows more about it from the other side.
Good idea.
Shall we welcome our guest, Ailsa Anderson?
Absolutely.
Ailsa, thank you so much for joining us again on a Right Roll podcast, on camera this time. I hope that is not too scary for you.
I think it's more scary for the viewers.
Cool. Now, look, just to remind everyone, you were Communications Secretary and Press Secretary for the late Queen Elizabeth II. You were there from 2001 to 2014. So, I mean, I bet you thought you'd had enough of sovereign grant reports.
Oh my goodness, considering that I must have failed my GCSE maths so many times, I can't believe I was the person put in charge of briefing the media on the sovereign grant.
I think we as journalists dread it every year because, many of us are not natural number crunchers. But, was it quite a stressful thing to have to do?
Very. And also trying to make it, I know, easy to understand for journalists and for the public, and it is very, very complicated. So we tried to think of a way to equate it and to make it almost normalised. So we came up with the idea is the taxpayer per person per year paid the equivalent of a loaf of bread or a pint of milk each year, and actually people can relate to that. They're just trying to make it more relatable.
That is actually, because you know what, Emily tried to explain this to me a little earlier, and I was just sort of like, not a clue. But that is actually a very good way of thinking about it. They're a pint of milk.
I know, a year, per person per year. And actually, people think, gosh, that's incredible. And people are always surprised about it.
Yeah, it makes it a lot more palatable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So do you think they're worth their while?
Absolutely, 110%.
She's joined the controversial debate that I'm trying to...
You're outnumbered now, aren't you? Yeah, exactly.
What was your argument?
Well, it was less of an argument, more of some of the things that we've noticed in, Emily's briefing that she was telling us about, that, Prince William, for instance, isn't being as transparent about his income taxes as King Charles was when he was the Prince of Wales, that sort of thing. So I was trying to get a rise out of Emily, but she would not. She's all for it.
She's a pro.
But what do you think of that, though, about William keeping things a little closer to his chest?
Well, that's his decision. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to disclose, and he's pretty open. I think an open individual anyway. But that's a matter for him. That's his decision.
Fair enough. Let's say fairer than that. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Ailsa, I want to talk about the Olympics because I'm a huge fan, and we've seen that Princess Anne is out in Paris, which is great news, right? Because she's had a rough few weeks. You've worked with her. What's she like as a person?
She is incredible, and I know you would probably expect me to say that anyway, but I mean, an absolute professional, reads her brief thoroughly from top to bottom. And you must remember those iconic photographs of her when it was announced that the UK, that London was going to get the Olympics in 2012, and hugging people, hugging Sebastian Coe, that spontaneity. And I think, it would be hell freezing over to stop her from going to Paris to support Team GB. So let's keep our fingers and toes crossed that the team does well.
Yeah, she is such a great ambassador, isn't she? And of course, she's been there and done it and won the medal.
Absolutely. So she's practiced what she preaches.
And obviously, Paris isn't a million miles away. It would be great to see some other members of the family if anyone is able to make the trip.
I was going to say, is the question mark over Princess Anne attending to do with her recovery from whatever it was
there was a question mark, I guess, but not really. It was never really in doubt, was it?
And of course, she is patron or president of the British Olympic Association. So it just goes, it's a natural fit for her to go over there and support the team before they start.
Fair enough.
Now, you were at the Palace.
This is what we really want to ask.
Yeah,
I'm really excited about this.
You were at the Palace for London 2012.
I was.
And I just want to take everyone back and talk a bit about that extraordinary moment with the Queen and James Bond. Can you tell us how that all came about?
Well, it was Danny Boyle approaching the Palace, and the Queen was asked, and she didn't hesitate. She said yes. But obviously it was all under wraps. No one knew about it, including the family. I think, again, you looked at the look on people's faces, Zara and Mike Tyndall, when it looked like the Queen was parachuting out of that helicopter. And no one knew. And it was that element of surprise. And I think it just demonstrated how the late Queen, would take chances, but also had this extraordinary sense of humour. I mean, the Paddington sketch she did for her Platinum Jubilee. That cheeky, happy sense of humour and, willing to put, country before self.
It was. I actually rewatched it yesterday because I was lucky enough to be in the stadium for the opening ceremony, covering it as a news reporter in those days. And I was in the press stand, and about 20 minutes before it happened, we were handed an operational note just saying that this was going to happen. I remember ringing my news desk and saying, apparently the Queen is going to parachute into the Olympic Stadium. And they thought I'd had some kind of funny turn.
Lay off the wine, Emily.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, come on, it's day one. You've got a long way to go. But it was just extraordinary. And I'll never forget the reaction from people there because, like you say, members of the family weren't expecting it. It was just
audible gasp of
an absolute genius moment.
Yeah.
I do like, though, it's funny because when it then cuts to the actual Queen, she's not smiling. Did you guys notice that?
Maybe she didn't like seeing the bloomers, the bloomers.
Do you think it was the bloomers that did it?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Were you there when they filmed her with Daniel Craig?
I was in the palace. I wasn't there while the filming happened. He is my favourite Bond.
I was going to say you didn't get to say hello to Daniel there.
Sadly not.
Moving on, the King and Queen coming to the end of their royal engagements for the year. They were in Jersey and Guernsey. They've had a really busy time, given that he's still recovering from cancer. And we've had this confirmation that they're going to Australia and Samoa in October. That's a big ask, isn't it, for the kid? He's 75.
I know. She's 76.
She
77.
Yes,
She
indeed.
doesn't love flying as well, does she?
She doesn't.
She does. A long way to go.
But again, duty above self. And of course, as we all know, the king is a workaholic. He doesn't want to let anyone down. It's been in the diary, this trip, for a long time. And he wanted to do it. She wanted to do it. She wanted to be there in her own right as queen, but also to support him.
And it's the first visit from a reigning monarch to Australia since 2011. How important is it?
Well, I did the late Queen's last trip to Australia, so Canberra, Brisbane, Melbourne, and finally Perth. So those trips are pretty arduous. It's a long flight. It's long distance. It's hot. But I have to say, the atmosphere in Australia was electric, and the welcome for both her and Prince Philip was extraordinary. And we ended up in Perth hosting the big Aussie barbecue. And it was like going to a Beyonce pop concert. I mean, people were knee deep in this sort of these fields, trying to have a glimpse at the Queen and Prince Philip. It was absolutely, it was magnetic. So, speaking from personal experience, the draw of the monarchy to Australia is still enormous, and there is a huge affection for them.
You think Charles will get a warm welcome then?
I think he will. Yes, I can't think of any reason why not. I think he, since becoming king, he hasn't put a foot wrong. Yeah, and he's been up against cancer diagnosis, going through chemotherapy, and yet what he's been doing is faultless.
It's a really big moment, I think, for him as well, because it's the first visit to one of his overseas realms since becoming king, and it's kind of been postponed, hasn't it? I think that they certainly would have hoped to have gone there or to Canada much sooner, and they've taken New Zealand off the schedule for medical reasons.
It's just too much.
It's just too much, I think. And Samoa, again, is, it's another sort of 5 or 6 hours on.
I'm sure they will pace the programme. He's got an extraordinary private secretary in Clive Alderton, so they will look at the programme. They'll make sure it's paced. He will have to do the events that he has to do in terms of being the constitutional monarch, so meeting the Prime Minister. But there will also be some fun things, I should think, interspersed with it. So I think it'll be a brilliant visit. Are you going?
I hope so. I think I read somewhere, and I checked this, actually, it's his first official visit to Samoa, but he did call in there in 1974 when he was on board HMS Jupiter, serving in the Royal Navy. So might get to have a bit more of a look around this time. What's it like organising one of those trips from a press office point?
Yeah, it depends where you're going. Sometimes you feel you're part press officer, part travel guide. Arranging the logistics of getting the media and photographers to where they have to be in advance so they can capture the moment that the royal family arrive.
Yeah.
Nothing is left to chance. Every detail has to be checked and checked again. Otherwise, the eyes of the world are on you, so you can't afford to make any mistakes. And also, you've got your own professional relationship with the media, and I don't want to upset them, but then I've got to balance with what the royals are doing. So I hope, Emily, you and I work together. I hope you haven't got a beef with me and how I've planned anything.
Never.
Yeah, that's a good point. Should we clear some air here?
No, always. You can say now. Ailsa was always a dream to work with. But these trips are, as you say, they're quite demanding. They're grueling physically
early starts, as you know, because you have to be head of the royal party. So
A lot of writing on the go.
Yes.
yeah, you never know when your next meal is going to be.
Yeah, sitting on buses.
A lot of bus action.
Yeah,
I do like to update you on my bus travels, don't I?
I mean, I think it's just, when we've spoken to fellow journalists who've also been there before, and it's just like the bus is a big part of it for you all, I think.
I mean, it is. And his snacks.
Snacks, yeah.
It's an extraordinary privilege to get to travel and do these things, isn't it? But, we wouldn't be journalists without quite a lot of moaning about things as well.
Oh, surely not. Oh, my goodness. I remember one photographer, nameless, we were on a visit to Turkey with the Queen and Prince Philip, and he was so frustrated about something, he actually made the embassy press officer cry.
Oh,
so I felt I was almost like being her mother in the middle of all of this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's akin to diplomacy, I think, isn't it? Working in
Absolutely.
the Palace Communications Department.
Yes. It's a balancing act, Emily.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Prince George turning 11, because where has time gone?
I know.
We got that lovely portrait. I mean,
He's so handsome, isn't he? Oh, my goodness. Charming. He is Prince Charming.
he looks like William, I think. What do you?
Yeah, but a lot like his maternal grandfather as well. I think he looks like Michael Middleton. He's definitely got a look of him. His eyes.
Interesting. I mean, well, you were both there on the day. I mean, what do you remember the day that he was born?
Well, Ailsa had the starring role, so I'll let her remember that.
So, of course, as a communications person, you're always behind the scenes and you're a spokesperson. You're never in front of the camera. So, for once in my life, I was. So, I was honoured to walk across that iconic forecourt at Buckingham Palace and post the announcement about Prince George's birth on the railings.
Oh, wow. So, where the sort of big sign that they put up and everything.
Absolutely.
So what was that like? Were you nervous before?
Absolutely nervous.
So many people there.
There were loads. Yeah, I'm very nervous. And
Don't drop it.
I know, absolutely don't drop it. But then it's funny, you get home and my son had been at a play date at a tea party. And he said, Mummy, we saw you on the telly. Wasn't very interesting.
They're very good at putting you back in your place. Yeah.
But was there like a cheer from the crowd when the sign went up?
Absolutely. And then the crowds to witness it. I mean, they were sort of up to Green Park. People queuing to just take a look at the notice. Well, it's history. It's history.
People love witnessing it, don't they? I think that, and also I was thinking about this earlier. To go back to the Olympics again, the royals were really on quite high, weren't they? Because they'd had the royal wedding, the Jubilee, London 2012. People were fully on board with them.
Absolutely. I mean, it was the monarchy at its best during that time. It really was. And this time now, I'm not just, it's a bit like, the pomp and ceremony for trooping the colour. This is what we do best.
Yeah.
It was a very happy time in the palace.
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
What was the mood like behind the scenes that day? Well, were people sort of genuinely excited?
So my lovely former colleague, Ed Perkins, was press secretary to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as they were. So I got the call in the morning to say that things were happening, and we were all in the office just waiting on tenterhook for him to call and say, get ready. So excitement. Maybe a glass of champagne was drunk after the announcement was made. I couldn't possibly comment
on that one. I mean, now he's 11. How would you say his life has differed from Charles and William, his childhood?
I think both his parents, is my personal view, want to protect him and give him as much privacy and sort of downtime as they can. Try and make his upbringing as normal as possible. And I understand both parents do the school run. They try and be as normal parents as possible. I think that's where it differs.
Do you think he's having king classes? Well, seriously, though, because Elizabeth didn't she? She knew all about the the legislation.
Is this your learnings from the Crown again?
Yeah. No. She peruses all of her old journals when she meets Winston Churchill. I remember it well. So I'm curious whether they ever have to sit with Prince George down half an hour a week and just,
I have absolutely no idea. I think a lot of it's probably picked up by osmosis. When you're on, you're front and centre of witnessing those events, you'll pick it up. I've just wished my children would be as well behaved as those children. They are amazing.
Louisa.
Oh, he's so sweet, isn't he? I know, but everyone loves him.
Everyone loves him.
I know. But I think they're just so well behaved.
It's good, and it does keep everything relatable, I think. You need to know they're having a bit of fun.
Yeah. And you can see that when they're jigging, when there's music going. I just think it's utterly charming.
The children make them more relatable, don't they? Especially the king, like at the Jubilee when he had Louis sat on his knee, that sort of thing. I mean, do you think we're seeing a bit of a softer side to the royal family these days?
I think they've always been like that. I've seen a softer side behind the scenes. And maybe people are just talking about it more.
Maybe so. It did always feel like the Queen had a bit of a sturdier personality in public, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, you look at those amazing cine films that Prince Philip took, sort of behind the scenes of the children when they were growing up, and the barbecues and the skating stuff on Britannia that he made for the children and going down slides. And I think that made them relatable.
Yeah.
There's the formality, which you will always see because they are head of state, but then there's behind the scenes family. Yeah. And I think all those sort of home movies really displayed that.
You've really just reminded me of that anecdote that William told about how the Queen gave them a telling off when they nearly killed Zara with a...
Yes, when they were on the...
were they on quad bike?
I think they were on quad bike.
Like that, and they went into a post and it nearly fell on her, and Granny comes storming across the garden to have a word.
Off with their heads.
Yeah, well, yeah. So something that we've noticed William and Kate doing a lot is sort of keeping the kids' lives very, very private, but then also choosing as and when to share pictures of them on social media. I mean, do you think that's the best way of doing it?
I think it's the best way for them. You've got to do the balance of letting your children have the most normal childhood they can, but then giving a little bit of, a spotlight when and if. And I think the photographs of the birthdays, I know there was controversy over the Mother's Day photograph, but what I would say to the detractors there is who hasn't, touched up a photograph of themselves. I do it. I'm sure you guys do it. Who doesn't?
I think, and even if it's not, you select the one you like the most. There's always...
And this is someone who's, probably the most photographed woman in the world. She's going through chemotherapy. You want to look your best because everyone is going to scrutinise.
Absolutely.
So I have not an issue with it at all.
I guess what I'm wondering about it is why is it social media and not sending the odd photo to the press instead? Is that sending sort of like a message, or is that not?
I don't think so. But there's still the royal rota who attend official engagements. So I think it's that it's a compromise. There's some where proper photographers attend and they get the rota pass so they can record it, and there's some other stuff on social media. So it's a happy medium.
There's been a few eyebrows raised about the fact that in the past the palace would put photographs around to the press under embargo, so they'd be on the front pages the next day. And we've talked about this before. I think they're just doing things in a slightly different way.
Why has that started happening?
Well, look, I think they have social media now, so they can communicate directly, perhaps.
And professionals as well. It's not someone like me who's an amateur doing it. They've employed professional people who are experts on social media who actually do a fantastic job.
Yeah, so there is an element of that. And also it's not, necessarily a new policy. It's the way they've done it this year, though, but it is an unusual time for them at the moment, obviously, with Kate not being as visible as she normally would be.
Would you prefer it the way it was a little bit with the getting it a day ahead?
Look, it was helpful for deadlines and things, but less of an issue for us, really. And we are generally aware that something's coming. So that, I think that's a pretty good arrangement.
Castlemore. Well, my last question about Prince George. Let's look to the future. I mean, what do you think it's going to look like when he's king? How do you think things will be different?
Oh my goodness.
He'll be travelling in a flying car, obviously.
Oh my God. It'll be AI, won't it?
Exactly.
Is it Prince George or isn't it Prince George?
Yeah, you'll never know.
I don't know. If I had a crystal ball, then I'd be in my own castle. I don't know. I think the country will be very different. I mean, how many years will it be?
Well, indeed.
William's 42.
It could be a very long way.
It will. I don't know whether I'll be around to see it.
So I mean, you'll be back on the show, right?
In my Zimmer frame.
We'll circle back. Yeah, season 200.
The country will be, the world will be a different place. You talk about technology. Who knows? And who knows how they will communicate? George might be married.
Yeah.
He might have children of his own when he becomes monarch.
Oh, God, I'd be old. Yeah.
I'm not sure I could put in another shift at the Linden.
No. You're
just putting that out there now.
We've retired from the Linden.
I think those days have gone for me.
Well, a little bit closer to the future is the Invictus Games, which is coming back to the UK or so I hear.
Yes.
What's the deal? What's going on?
There's quite a big development. Well, Birmingham was up against Washington, D.C. to host the Games in 2027. Of course, the next one is in Vancouver and Whistler. So it was always going to be an interesting choice because on the one hand, it meant coming back to the UK, fantastic for veterans here and for the country. But the question mark was, how does that leave the royals in relation to it? Because naturally, the King's head of the armed forces, you'd hope that he'd want to support it. But there's this very difficult situation the family finds itself in at the moment with Harry. On the other hand, had it gone to DC and we were in a Trump presidency, that would also have been very tricky for Prince Harry. They don't famously get on very well with each other. So look, I think it's great news. I'm very excited that it's coming to Birmingham. But the big question mark is going to be, will there be any royal involvement?
Do you reckon, Ailsa?
Should there be? You know, this is Prince Harry's baby, and I have to say, I think he's done an extraordinary job with it.
Yeah.
I'm the daughter of a naval officer. I know how much the military appreciate what he has done, and he's put his heart and soul in it.
Yeah.
So, does there need to be anyone else?
No, that's a very, very valid point.
I guess so, but also, I mean, for me, it's just what the media would be saying, and like if no royals lend their support to it, then that would just take over the whole narrative? What would you do if you were still at the palace? How would you?
But just to flip it on its head,
yeah.
If another member of the royal family turns up, it's not going to be about the Invictus Games. It's going to be about the body language with Harry and whoever it is. You know, it's going to be speculation. So, and then it's not about the injured servicemen and women. It's about something completely different.
Absolutely. It does make sense. It's a catch-22 of a situation.
Yeah, well, because we've seen anything can happen in a very short space of time. So, and in the last 6 months, we've seen that play out. So I guess, you know, we've got 3 years to go. There could be a lot of water under the bridge by then. It could be a great vehicle for them to build bridges again.
Can I just ask, who decides where the Invictus Games are going to be held?
This is a good question. It is the Invictus Games Foundation Committee, I believe.
Because surely both of those options are not great for Harry. Like, there's anywhere else in the world would be fine, but, you know, America and England are the sort of dodgy ones.
Yeah. I vote for the Caribbean myself. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, next time, for sure. Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think Birmingham was a great option because they'd hosted the Commonwealth Games not long ago, but also there's this real connection through Birmingham because veterans coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq in particular,
the hospital
were treated there initially, and a lot of them, that was their first port of call. So it's somewhere that's very close to their hearts already as veterans. So it is quite a natural fit, actually.
Just inevitable awkwardness, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a good idea, but then comes with that. Well, yeah, it's 3 years. It's in 3 years' time.
Let's watch this space. I'm sure we will be discussing it in great detail for quite some time to come.
I mean, do you think it could be an opportunity for Harry to reconcile with William and Charles?
Well, again, who knows? 3 years, you know, lots of things can happen in 3 years. So, who knows?
Would you like to see that, though?
Oh, any family who are not reconciled, who don't get on, is a tragedy in my view. But actually, it happens in a lot of families, whether you're a monarch or a market stall holder. You know, it can happen to all of us. Maybe that makes it more relatable.
They're just on the world's biggest stage with it.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's very hard when you've got the eyes of the world on you.
Absolutely.
The Wales children are broken up for the summer holidays. We're not expecting to see the Prince and Princess of Wales for a few weeks now. But we did have that appearance from the Princess at Wimbledon. How important is that to the messaging around her health?
Well, I think, I watched it and I just thought, you know, hearing that massive roar from the crowd when she walked in, and I thought, golly, that must give her sustenance if anything else. This
so
amazing, you know, really just to feel the genuine love and warmth of affection for her. And I think yeah, how wonderful is that? And I thought she looked incredible. She looked amazing, didn't she?
She really did.
And having Princess Charlotte there and her sister, I mean, I know it was an official engagement, but it was also sort of a family affair as well.
It was sisterhood.
And she loves tennis. It was a genuine passion for her. So I think, yeah, how amazing. And actually, a real message of hope and reassurance.
Mm-hmm. I really love the moment where Charlotte realises everyone's clapping for her mum as well. It's so sweet, and she just looks so proud of her.
It's very, very cute.
It's a bit emotional watching.
I think it was quite emotional because I think everyone there realised what they've been through over the past 6 months, and everyone knows someone who's...
Absolutely. 50% of the population get one form of cancer or another.
Yeah, so it is, we've talked about this recently, but it's a kind of a great leveller, isn't it? And it has made them even more relatable, I think.
I agree.
So it was great to see her. But again, she hasn't been that visible this year. She is very important, isn't she, for the monarchy's image?
She is. But she's got to put, like anyone who is suffering from cancer and undergoing treatment, you've got to put your health and well-being and welfare before anything else for the sake of your children, your husband, your family. Yeah, that's got to be the priority.
Yeah, and it looks like she's definitely got her priorities right. There's no rushing back and forcing herself to do things. I'm glad she did Wimbledon. I know some people have said, well, she should have gone and visited a charity, but actually...
have a day off.
It's something that...
Let her go and watch Wimbledon.
So she is president of the Lawn Tennis Association.
She is.
So
valid.
So this is something that... officially, she's involved with. It's not just the random, I fancy going and watching Wimbledon. No. She does have an official title to do with Wimbledon.
But, I mean, this bodes well, hopefully, for the autumn, doesn't it? I mean, we'd like to think we'll be seeing a bit more of her.
Absolutely. It would be...
Once we're all back to school.
Be really nice. You're really great to the pod as well.
It would be...
It's all about the pod.
It is all about us. Just going back to summer, you and I talked recently about Balmoral. Did I mention I've been to Balmoral?
It might come up
full time,
come up every day.
But you were a regular visitor to Balmoral, and I wondered if you'd share a little bit more about where you used to stay when you went up there, because I found this fascinating.
So we stayed. Obviously, there's the castle, the main house, but the press team stayed in Queen Victoria's old schoolhouse, where her children were homeschooled.
Wow,
which is amazing. And I remember when I first stayed there, being shown to my room, sort of 2 flights of stairs, I think it was. So sort of an attic room. And I opened a door, and I get a bit freaked out about sort of places. But I opened this door, and there were the tables and chairs, school tables and chairs, the Queen Victoria's children sat at, all sort of stacked in a corner. Hadn't been touched. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, Balmoral is the most beautiful, restful, peaceful place that you could get sustenance from. I mean, it's amazing. And I think I've told Emily the story that actually the Queen's Protection Officer told me, and it's in the public domain, but it's funny. So he and the Queen were out walking on the estate, just the two of them, and walking towards them were a group of American tourists. And they stopped them and said, we understand this is the Queen's estate. Have either of you ever met her? And the protection officer said the Queen said as quick as a flash, well, he has. And this woman gave the Queen their camera and said, could you just take a photograph of us with this man? And the Queen did.
Brilliant.
The Queen did.
That is brilliant.
And of course, she dined out in that story forever afterwards.
Oh, I'd love to know if they ever realised.
Like they probably did about 10 minutes later.
Oh, man. Put 2 and 2 together.
I know.
She was very well to do, wasn't she?
How kind she was to take our photograph.
I know.
But the Queen was known to being a very keen camera woman.
Was she? Yeah. Good photographer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to see some of those.
Staying in the old schoolhouse, though, just out of curiosity, at night time, was it a bit spooky?
Very.
Was it?
Very. In fact, I think I told Emily the story as well. I was staying at Windsor Castle one night after an event, and single room, no ensuite. It's not as glamorous.
Yeah,
I just say. And I woke up about 2:00 in the morning and wanted to pee, so I ran down the corridor and closed the bathroom door, and before I'd finished, it flushed by itself. And it wasn't one of these modern, electronic. This was an old-fashioned with the chain.
Who pulled the chain?
Who pulled the chain? I've never run so fast back into my room.
No. I love a spooky royal.
You do. I think I think we might need to revisit our royal ghost stories.
Because I get Halloween.
I wouldn't need to dress up, that's for sure.
Oh, well. What? Oh, my goodness. That's quite a useful ghost to have, though, right? Especially if you're a germaphobe.
Very handy. What was it that they used to be called? Groom of the store?
Closet. Groom of the
closet, something like that. So maybe he, the ghost of the old helper still lingers.
This has taken quite a turn, hasn't it?
Oh my goodness. I might be able to go to sleep tonight.
How have we gone from summer holidays to Halloween? I think we can always find a way. Yeah. Skipping ahead a little bit too fast. But Ailsa, it's an absolute delight to have you with us. Thanks so much for coming in.
You're always a joy to talk to, both of you.
I'm sure we'd love to have you back.
Yes, please come back. It's October, the 31st.
It's always so good having Ailsa on the show, and I really hope she'll be back soon.
She's a wealth of knowledge, isn't she? Honestly, I could listen to her all day, but I think it's time that we're wrapping things up.
It is. That's everything from us today. Thank you so much to Ailsa and to you two for joining us. We'll be back very soon.
But in the meantime, catch more from Hello with our news and entertainment show, The Daily Lowdown, available on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. Bye!